The Roman Empire was not simply a large ancient state. It was one of history's most influential political systems, stretching across the Mediterranean world and deep into Europe, Western Asia, and North Africa. At its height, Roman authority connected Britain, Egypt, Syria, Spain, North Africa, Greece, and the Balkans through roads, ports, armies, taxes, laws, and cities. Yet the empire did not appear overnight. It grew out of the Roman Republic, a system that had conquered huge territories while still claiming to be governed by elected officials and old civic traditions. The great drama of Rome is that its outward success created pressures its republican institutions could no longer contain. As Rome expanded, generals gained private armies, wealthy elites competed for power, and conquered lands poured money, slaves, and ambition into the capital. The empire was born from conquest, but also from a political crisis over who would control the rewards of that conquest. By around 100 BC, Rome had already moved far beyond being a city-state on the Italian peninsula. It controlled most of the Mediterranean basin, often called by Romans our sea. But expansion brought instability. The Republic had been designed for a smaller world, where annual magistrates, the Senate, and citizen assemblies could manage political life. Now Rome governed distant provinces, commanded enormous armies, and faced rival leaders who could use military loyalty as a path to domination. Civil wars and political violence became increasingly common. The question was no longer whether Rome would rule the Mediterranean, but whether Rome itself could be ruled by its old republican system. Ambitious commanders like Julius Caesar, Pompey, Mark Antony, and later Octavian transformed politics into a struggle backed by legions. The Republic's institutions survived in name, but the real contest was shifting toward personal power. The decisive turning point came after the assassination of Julius Caesar and the power struggle that followed. Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, competed with Mark Antony, who had allied himself with Cleopatra, ruler of Egypt's Ptolemaic kingdom. Their rivalry culminated at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, a naval confrontation that ended with Octavian's victory. Soon after, Egypt was conquered and became a crucial Roman possession, providing wealth, grain, and strategic control of the eastern Mediterranean. Octavian now stood without a serious rival. But instead of openly declaring himself king, a title Romans despised, he reshaped power more carefully. In 27 BC, the Senate granted him overarching military authority, known as imperium, and the honorific title Augustus. This moment marks the beginning of the Roman Empire in its classic form, not a monarchy in official language, but a system where one man held the decisive power. Augustus' genius was political disguise as much as military success. He presented himself as the restorer of the Republic, even while concentrating authority in his own hands. The Senate, magistracies, and traditional offices continued to exist, which helped make the new order acceptable to Rome's elite. But the emperor controlled the most important armies, finances, and provinces. Roman territories were divided into senatorial provinces and imperial provinces. Senatorial provinces were generally more peaceful and governed by proconsuls appointed through traditional processes. Imperial provinces, often on the frontiers or containing major armies, belonged effectively to the emperor and were governed by his legates. This arrangement preserved the appearance of shared rule while ensuring that military power remained under imperial control. The result was the Principate, a system that blended republican forms with one-person rule, creating stability without admitting that the Republic had truly ended. The first 2 centuries of imperial history are often remembered as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. This did not mean there were no wars, rebellions, or suffering. Roman peace was enforced by legions, taxation, and sometimes brutal repression. But compared with the civil wars of the late Republic and the chaos that would come later, the period brought remarkable stability across much of the empire. Trade expanded along roads and sea routes. Cities flourished. Roman law and administration gave provincial elites a framework for advancement. Local cultures remained diverse, but they increasingly operated inside a Roman political world. An aristocrat in Gaul, a merchant in Alexandria, and a soldier on the Danube all interacted with imperial systems of currency, law, military service, and citizenship. The empire's durability came not only from conquest, but from its ability to integrate conquered peoples into a shared Roman order. Rome reached its greatest territorial extent under Emperor Trajan, who ruled from 98 to 117 AD. Under him, the empire expanded into Dacia north of the Danube and pushed deep into the eastern regions during campaigns against Parthia. On a map, Trajan's empire looks overwhelming, an arc of Roman-controlled lands surrounding the Mediterranean and reaching across 3 continents. But size was both a triumph and a burden. Every frontier required soldiers, supplies, fortifications, roads, and commanders who could be trusted. Communication across such distances was slow, and the empire depended on local cooperation as much as central orders. Later emperors often focused less on new conquests and more on defending what Rome already possessed. The Roman Empire's greatest challenge was not merely winning territory, but maintaining a vast system whose borders touched many different peoples, climates, economies, and military threats. The stability of the Pax Romana began to show deeper cracks in the late 2nd century. The reign of Commodus, from 180 to 192 AD, is often treated as a symbolic turning point, not because everything collapsed instantly, but because confidence in imperial leadership weakened. Rome's system depended heavily on the person of the emperor. A capable ruler could coordinate armies, manage elites, and maintain legitimacy. A weak or erratic ruler could trigger court plots, military unrest, and succession crises. The empire had no simple, stable rule for choosing each new emperor. Adoption, heredity, military acclamation, and assassination all played roles at different times. When the throne became uncertain, armies could elevate their own candidates, and rival claimants could plunge the state into civil war. The empire's strengths remained enormous, but its political structure carried a dangerous weakness: the center could become the battlefield. In the 3rd century, that weakness exploded into a prolonged emergency sometimes called the crisis of the 3rd century. For roughly 50 years, Rome faced civil wars, plagues, economic strain, and invasions along multiple frontiers. Emperors rose and fell rapidly, many ruling only briefly before being killed, overthrown, or replaced by the army. The empire even fractured into breakaway regimes. In the west, the Gallic Empire controlled parts of Gaul, Britain, and Spain. In the east, the Palmyrene Empire challenged Roman authority from a powerful base in Syria. These were not simple foreign invasions, they were signs that provincial regions believed they needed their own rulers for defense and survival. Rome's imperial system had become too unstable to guarantee protection everywhere. The crisis threatened the empire's existence by attacking its legitimacy, economy, military coordination, and sense of unity all at once. The empire survived the 3rd century crisis because it could still produce forceful reformers and commanders. Aurelian, who ruled from 270 to 275, reunified the empire by defeating the breakaway Gallic and Palmyrene regimes. His reign showed that Roman military power had not disappeared, even if the political system was badly strained. But reunification alone did not solve the underlying problems. Diocletian, who came to power in 284, introduced deeper reforms. He recognized that one emperor ruling the entire empire from one center was increasingly impractical. Diocletian created a system of multiple imperial courts, dividing responsibilities between Eastern and Western rulers. This was not yet the final permanent split, but it marked an important shift. The empire was still one Roman state in theory, but its administration, defense, and political life were becoming more regional. Survival required decentralization. Constantine the Great transformed the empire in 2 ways that shaped world history. First, he became the first Christian emperor, placing Christianity on a path from persecuted faith to imperial religion. This did not instantly make the empire uniformly Christian, but it changed the relationship between religion and power. Second, in 330 AD, Constantine moved the imperial seat to Byzantium and refounded it as Constantinople. The location was strategic, closer to the wealthy eastern provinces, defensible, and positioned between Europe and Asia. Rome remained symbolically powerful, but the empire's center of gravity increasingly shifted eastward. Constantinople became a new capital for a changing empire, one that drew on Roman law and imperial tradition while operating in a Greek-speaking Eastern world. Constantine's choices helped ensure that even if the western half weakened, Roman imperial identity would continue in the east. The Western Roman Empire declined under the pressure of internal weakness and massive external movements often associated with the migration period. Germanic peoples and the Huns pushed across frontiers, sometimes as invaders, sometimes as refugees, allies, or military recruits. The Western government struggled to pay armies, control generals, and defend widely separated territories. Power shifted away from emperors toward military strongmen and non-Roman commanders inside the imperial system. In 476 AD, the Germanic leader Odoacer deposed the young emperor Romulus Augustus after the fall of Ravenna. This event is traditionally used as the fall of the Western Roman Empire. But it was not a single dramatic collapse of all Roman life. Many Roman institutions, laws, cities, and elites continued under new rulers. What ended was the Western imperial office and the political unity once claimed by Rome in the West. While the Western Empire fell, the Eastern Empire endured. Known today as the Byzantine Empire, it was in its own eyes still Roman. Its rulers called themselves Roman emperors, governed from Constantinople, and preserved Roman law, administration, and imperial ideology. Over time, the Eastern Empire became more Greek-speaking and developed its own distinctive religious, artistic, and political culture. Yet its Roman inheritance remained central. Constantinople's walls, wealth, and strategic position allowed it to survive waves of enemies for centuries. The Eastern Empire lasted nearly 1,000 years after the fall of the West, until Constantinople was conquered in 1453. This long survival challenges the simple idea that Rome fell in 476. A Western Empire ended then, but Roman statehood, adapted and transformed, continued far longer in the East. Rome's history is therefore not just a rise and fall, but a long evolution. The Roman Empire's legacy lasted because it shaped the foundations of later societies. Latin influenced the Romance languages and the vocabulary of law, science, religion, and government across Europe. Roman law became a model for legal systems, especially through later codifications and rediscoveries. Roman architecture and engineering inspired roads, aqueducts, arches, domes, public buildings, and imperial monuments for centuries. Christianity spread through the Roman world, transformed religion across Europe and beyond. Roman political ideas also survived in surprising ways. The memory of the Republic influenced medieval city-state republics, the early United States, and modern democratic language about senates, citizenship, civic duty, and mixed government. Even the rediscovery of classical science and learning helped contribute to the scientific renaissance and the scientific revolution. Rome vanished as a unified Western Empire, but its institutions, symbols, and ideas continued to shape the world that followed. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.